Great. Okay, so tomorrow you'll receive an evaluation form from us. We will email you with a form, so please do fill that out. It helps us make our webinars better in the future. You can give us some ideas if you're looking for something specific for us to do. We are going to be offering webinars all throughout the fall and winter and into the spring, and always looking to see what people are interested in hearing about. Just a quick backstory on New Hampshire Lakes, if you're not familiar with us. We are the only publicly supported nonprofit organization working for all of New Hampshire's 1,000 lakes. Yes, we do have 1,000 lakes and ponds here in New Hampshire. I didn't know that before I worked here. It's amazing. You can support our efforts by going to our website, newhampshirelakes.org, making a donation, becoming a member. It supports programs just like these, the ones that you're seeing tonight, as well as many other things that we do offer. Our mission is to keep New Hampshire's lakes clean and healthy now and in the future. We work with our partners, promote clean water policies and responsible use, and inspire the public to take care of our lakes so that we can continue to enjoy them throughout our own lifetimes, as well as through the lifetimes of our children and our children's children. We do that through our different programs. We do advocacy work at the State House. A lot of people get really passionate about advocacy work. If that sounds like something that would be a good fit for you, certainly reach out to Michelle. She is our advocacy program manager. And we also offer a conservation program. A lot of people do know about our lake host program, making sure that aquatic invasive species don't make their way into or out of our lakes. We also offer our LakeSmart program, helping homeowners learn about things they can do on their own properties to protect our lakes. And you don't have to live right on the lake for that to happen. There are things that I'm doing at my own house now that I know about this program, and I don't live on the lakefront. We also have our outreach programs, which are making things just like our webinars available to the public. And we want to give a huge shout out to Grapponi Automotive Group. They've been a longtime supporter of New Hampshire Lakes. They are in the Bow area, and I've bought my last 2 vehicles from them. They're amazing, easy to work with, in and out. I can't believe how quick it was. So if you are looking for a new vehicle, please consider shopping at Grapponi. And your host this evening, myself, Erin. I'm the outreach program coordinator, and we are joined this evening by Andrea, the New Hampshire Lakes president. She's also going to be helping me manage the chat box and questions at the end of the session. And of course, your expert presenter, we are lucky to have John Stevens with us. He's the owner of Stevens Landscaping Professionals. And like I mentioned before, he's a LakeSmart service provider partner, making sure that all the projects that he's doing through his business are going to be great for the lake. And he has a lot to share with us. So at that, I will turn it over to you, John.
All right, thank you. And go ahead and share. Make sure this is. All right, we up for everyone?
Looks good.
All right. Well, thank you, Erin. I really appreciate it. Thank you for asking me to come on here. It's an honor. And thank you to everyone that's logged on tonight. It's impressive to see how many people are here. So once again, I'm John Stevens. I'm a certified landscape professional in the state of New Hampshire. I'm owner of Stevens Landscaping Professionals out of Moultonborough, New Hampshire. And we are a design, build, and maintenance firm that does specialize in waterfront properties. And we've been in business since 2007. So it's been a great ride since we started, and I've certainly learned a lot along the way. We do our own permitting in-house, and so a lot of what you're going to see tonight is things that I've learned in working with the state and doing real life projects, and you know, what challenges there's been and what things we've learned from. So with that, I will get started. If I can change the 1 second. So tonight's agenda, we will be covering and discussing what the protected shoreland is. We will discuss proper vegetation buffer management. We'll also discuss what sort of landscaping can you do in your waterfront or on your waterfront. And we will discuss briefly just some of the key DES rule changes that have occurred in the last year and a half or so. We've got a LakeSmart pro tip. And then last but not least, we will open the floor for Q&A. So to start with the protected shoreland. So the protected shoreland is basically the first 250 feet from any body of water here in New Hampshire. And within that 250 feet, if you are looking to do any sort of excavation work, landscaping, constructing a house, paving a driveway, several different things, you will need to apply for a shoreland permit with the state of New Hampshire. And I also might as well start this off because some of this does kick back to townships as well and some of their rules. I'm going to mainly be talking about the state rules right now through most of this presentation. It is very smart to check locally as well because each town is able to set their own standards and rules for everything here. And so just keep that in the back of your head that unfortunately the state rules and local rules don't perfectly align. And I think part of my presentation here does talk about the fact that I think we need to advocate to have them align a little bit more so it's a clearer picture for everyone. So along that 250 feet shoreline protection area, there's what they call woodland buffer, and that is basically from the 50-foot to 150-foot zone on a property. And we'll talk about some rules later, what occurs in that zone. And then most importantly is the waterfront buffer, and that is the first 50 feet along the reference line of any body of water. And really one of the most critical locations along the shorefront. One of the common questions that we get, and I think a lot of people have, is can I remove trees, or what can I do with the trees that I have? And so to brief over some of the basic rules for tree work on a waterfront property. So you got to start with dead, dying, diseased, or hazardous trees may be removed, even if it happens to be the last tree that you have in one particular area. Sometimes leaving that for habitat is not a bad thing, but they can also become hazardous. So any of the tree removals that fall in that category should definitely be documented by an arborist. Most of the arborists in our area here certainly will be happy to come out, do an assessment, write up a document, and basically take photos and take care of the back end paperwork to make sure that you're covered, to make sure that you know, if anyone asks, this was documented as a dead, dying, diseased, or hazardous tree. Invasive species, we are seeing a lot, or at least I've been seeing a lot more of these. Bittersweet, Japanese knotweed, I hate to say that one, but it's all over the place. So invasive species are certainly able to be removed, no questions asked. It's preferred that you work on those by hand to remove them. However, I would consult with other professionals if it needs any sort of other treatment to get removal. One of the big things is, and a lot of people probably don't know this, is a state permit isn't needed to take down these trees that are dead, dying, diseased, or hazardous. And in the further slides, I'll talk about other rules that you have to fall within to do further tree work. And even if you're within those rules, you don't need to get a state permit. Again, locally, some townships have some permitting requirements for that. Pruning limbs on trees, certainly acceptable to do. A lot of people want to catch a little bit more view of the lake. People would like to remove deadwood out of the trees, which is smart. And one of the just rules of thumb would be never prune more than a third of the canopy out of a tree. I would actually suggest quite a bit less than that. And we've been using a technique with our arborist of layering the trees. So we kind of get, instead of a palm tree, we try to layer the branching so that you promote a healthier tree. Shoreline shrubs, you certainly can prune shoreline shrubs. The key there is you are not allowed to prune those below 3 feet in height. So you can maintain those shrubs at 3 foot off the ground, which is perfect to offer better viewing. A lot of people ask, how do you control geese? Keeping shrubs along the shoreline like that does help keep geese from getting onto the property. Never below 3 feet though. And lastly, on this category, stumps. Once the tree is cut down, these stumps must stay in place, but can be ground down mechanically below grade. So the key is that the root system stays intact, and that goes for the first 50 feet of the waterfront buffer. And we'll go ahead here. So once you've cleaned up the dead, dying, diseased, you've maybe done some pruning and gotten things where you need to, but you still are looking to create a little bit more space. Let's say you're looking to do a patio or something like that to sit, by the water or something like that. There is other rules in order to take down further trees. And again, this isn't a promotion to be taking down trees, but this is just giving you guys information so you know what requirements need to happen in order to do it. So there's grid segments along any property along the water. The grid segments used to be 50 by 50. Currently, Molten Borough still hangs on to that 50 by 50 foot grid segment and has a different point system and different point quantity. But for the state, they've moved to a 25 foot by 50 foot grid segment, and the 25 feet runs along the shoreline and the 50 feet runs back to the 50 foot setback, which is that waterfront buffer. And the key for them in changing this from a 50 by 50 to a 25 by 50 is I think they were finding a lot of people were stripping 40 feet of that 50 foot grid and leaving all the trees in one corner. So by going to a 25 foot by 50 foot, you are able to keep trees more consistently along the shoreline. And when you're doing an assessment here of what trees you have, there is a point system. And in each grid, you need to maintain 25 points at all times. So a 1 to 3 inch tree is 1 point, 3 to 6 is 5, 6 to 12 is 10, 12 plus is 15. So fairly easy to meet your 25 point requirement with a few larger trees. And you're going to be measuring those at about chest height, 4.5 feet off the ground. It's not saying that you should bring every grid down to 25 points. That is not the case. But in the event that you're trying to accomplish a usable space near the water, this is the system you use to kind of open up that area. And then tree management from the 50 foot setback to the 150 foot setback. So this one kicks in quite a bit when people are looking to expand their home, build a new home. So you have to keep basically 25% of what they call an unaltered area between the 50 foot and 150 foot setback. So an example of this is the area between 50 to 100 feet would be, let's say it's 30,000 square feet. You would be required to keep and maintain about 7,500 square feet of that as unaltered area. And that means native, no removal of trees. You can't have that be, landscaped area, and that's supposed to just stay native. Now, a lot of places don't meet these requirements. And so if you are going in for a shoreland permit, often you will get a revegetation plan. So you'll have to replant portions of that zone in order to get a certain amount of points, a certain amount of square footage back to meet the unaltered requirements. And then talking about lakeside landscaping, in my world, there's really two main terms that are used when we're talking about lakeside landscaping. And in this situation, we'll be talking about in the first 50 feet of that waterfront buffer. So water access structures is one and accessory structures is the other. The water access structure is defined as a structure without a roof or cover that is located adjacent to the shoreline to serve as a means of entry to the water from for swimming and non-boating activities, and or a location for the direct observation of swimmers. So basically, it becomes a safe access and a way for you to safely watch the kids in the water swimming. Accessory structures, those are defined as structures that are identical and subordinate from the primary structure, including pathways, driveways, patios, improved surfaces, pools, pump houses, gazebos, sheds, garages, and other outbuildings. Many of those that were just listed would not be suitable inside the 50-foot setback by many town requirements, let alone the state requirements. So we'll go ahead and jump into some details on these. Start with water access structures. I think most commonly people have heard of perch beaches, and that is and probably will be the most common water access structure that there is. Perch beaches, and in new rules now at the state level, they will allow you, instead of a perch beach, to have a deck or a patio, and we'll talk a little bit more about that. So some of the rules around water access structures are the access to the lake, the steps cannot be, and the pathways for that matter, to get to these structures cannot be more than 6 feet wide. Then as far as the sizing of these structures, you cannot, cut out more than 20% of the linear frontage that you own to create one of these structures. So if you have 100 feet of frontage, no more than 20 feet of that can become a water access structure. There's also slope requirements. This one usually X-nays the chances for several properties. It has to be within a slope of 25% or less. And that is somewhat hard to achieve in certain areas of the lake. But that is important because we don't want to have the runoff picking up any speed down any steeper slopes and then end up causing issues. And then in discussion about the actual size beyond the linear frontage size, no more than 50% of your allowable square footage can be a water access structure. And I'll elaborate on that in the next few slides. No new walk-in beaches allowed. I get that question all the time. If you have one, hang on to it. Unless it's severely eroding away, they will not allow or permit new walk-in beaches. Replenishment of sand on like a perch beach can occur every 6 years, no more than 10 cubic yards, not to exceed a depth of 6 inches. And that does require a wetlands permit to do so. And I should state as well that all water access structures, things built right at the shoreline like this, including docks, these all fall under wetlands permitting, which is a separate permit than the shoreline permit. I know the state's been trying to work on maybe combining the two into kind of one permit, but I think it's still got a long ways to go before we're there. Accessory structures. The most common accessory structures we install are patios, and they are limited to the following regulations. Right now, basically, in order to figure out how big of a accessory structure you could do, you take your linear frontage times 7.5, and that would give you the allowable accessory structure and water access structure that you would be able to do within your 50-foot buffer. So example, if you have 100 feet of frontage, you can do 750 square feet of patio, or you could do, say, 300 square feet of patio, and 300 square feet of perch beach, and 450 square feet of patio. And if I go back a slide, I guess I won't do that. I had mentioned no more than 50% of the water access structure of the allowable square footage can be a water access structure. So in this situation, you can't have a 400 square foot perch beach and a 350 square foot patio. You can't have more than 50% of your allowable square footage to be that water access structure. And then accessory structures must be behind the 20-foot setback line, which is from the high water mark. And that is an important aspect. And really within 20 feet is just not necessary. You can do a lot behind 20 feet, and you can still catch a great view of swimmers and of the lake and the view and everything like that. Any patios that get put in as accessory structures must be permeable. That's a change to the rules recently, but it's the only way to go. We install any patio anywhere as a permeable patio, and you can see in some of the photos to the side here, basically a permeable patio is a crushed stone basin below the patio, and then it ends up having joints that are either pea stone or some sort of permeable material to allow the rainwater to infiltrate and recharge in the ground. And again, no more than 6-foot wide pathways to the accessory structure or water access structures. And that pathway to a dock, a perch beach, a patio, that square footage does not count against you in your 750 square feet as we have it as a example here. So let me discuss this in a little bit more detail. The rules had changed, and this is going to talk about the current, which at the time of this graph was the old, I'm going to call now the old rules versus the new rules on the right. So first and foremost, and I'm going to use a perch beach as the water access structure, and patio and shed it shows here as the accessory structure. First and foremost, in old rules, a perch beach was a standalone item. It had its own rules and regulations within itself, had no marriage to accessory structures whatsoever. So in the old rules, you still had to meet some of the certain requirements, but there was one key item in there that basically said you can only you could have up to a 900 square foot perch beach, which is huge. It's very big, and it was, I think this state said it was a bit of an oversight, and when they were drafting those up and realized that they needed to change that rule. The calculation for accessory structures alone before was 1.5 times your linear frontage, but that had nothing to do with a perch beach. That could be its own thing. So you're seeing here on a typical 100-foot shoreline, before in the old rules, you could have you could have 900 square foot perch beach, and you could have 150 square feet of accessory structure. So you could have 1,050 square feet of more or less disturbance inside of that 50-foot area. And as we move to the new rules, basically they now married together perch beaches, water access structures, and accessory structures. They're all basically what square footage of disturbance can you do inside of 50 feet. And I was a part of some of these meetings when we started to discuss these changes and kind of what that multiplier should be based off of your linear frontage. And we landed on 7.5. It's more than the 1.5 that was there before, but now we're including the water access structures as one big group of square footages there. So when you do it this way, you take the 100 feet of frontage and you times it by 7.5. Now you have 750 square feet of max disturbance inside of that 50-foot area. And within that rule, we said no more than 50% can be a water access structure. And if you didn't do a water access structure, you could use the rest of that square footage all for your accessory structure if you want to. But they wouldn't allow you to use all of it for a water access structure. So that would minimize the disruption immediately along the shoreline. And as you can see, the rule gets a little bit, doesn't work as well as you go into larger linear frontages. So 150 linear feet, it's a wash more or less of disturbance area. 200 linear feet, you actually get a bonus of accessory structure area. But still, most commonly are 100-foot lots, 150-foot lots. So as you get to the larger 200-foot lots, usually you end up having quite a bit of vegetated area that has to remain anyway. So now that we move on to that, I'll show you a little bit of an example on plan view here. So we have in the red here a perch beach, and this is showing the old rule layout. So we have let's say a 350 square foot perch beach. We could have had a 900 square foot perch beach, just to put that in perspective in the old rules. But it was a 350 square foot perch beach. We have an accessory structure here, yellow, which is inside the 50-foot buffer area, but behind the 20-foot setback line. It's 135 square feet of accessory structure. And then in the purple, you can see there's a walkway. Some is solid, some is stepping stone, but that square footage does not count against any calculations. So that gives us a total of 486 square feet for this property, this situation, and that was maxing out in the old rules what this property could have done. And then in the new rules, if you were to take the front linear frontage here, 90 linear feet times 7.5, it was 675 square feet that you would be able to do. And I messed up in saying I did not max out, or this was not a maxed out project on the Perch Beach side. We only went 350 square feet. We could have gone 900 square feet. We did max out the accessory structure on this one at 136 square feet. But you can see there that the new rules, in a way, from what someone could have done if they went to that 900 square foot Perch Beach, the rules, limited that possible disruption area. So that is that portion, and I'm going to brief over a few other rule changes here at the state. There were several different rule changes, but just some notable ones. All new pathways, walkways, and patios must be permeable inside 50 feet. Like I said before, this is great. Permeable pavers, permeable natural stone patios, we do a lot of those. They are really effective at capturing rainwater and recharging the groundwater. Like I said, we're utilizing that concept everywhere, whether it's a lakefront property or not. And it really, there's a lot of benefits to that. The wetlands abutter setback used to be a 20-foot setback. That was changed to a 10-foot setback. Gives a little bit more flexibility for dock placement, and also like the Perch Beach structure itself could be within the, now the up to 10 feet from the property line, where before it had to be 20. So again, it gives you a little bit more flexibility at finding the least impacting location for those sort of structures. Permit review times were shortened. That's awesome. They used to have some pretty lengthy review times on some of the stuff, but God bless them, they get a lot thrown at them. So I know they need the time and they've been short staffed. So there's a lot of great people that we work with down there, and they do put themselves on a pretty tight shot clock to review some of these things. But for the end user, it's nice to turn around permits a little quicker. And for the end user, this one's not as great, but they did basically double the application fees and remove the fact that there used to be a cap on some of the permit fees for some of that. And just being a little witty, are you surprised? But I guess they could use some of that income to do some more hiring and advocacy and stuff like that. So what can you do to help? We talked a little bit about the fact that state rules don't necessarily align with local town rules. And, advocating locally, not only about what New Hampshire Lakes is doing and lake protection, but also advocating about the rules that are out there. The state spends an enormous amount of money developing these rules and backing them with science and a lot of this. And it's tough for me to see, for us to see that, they put all this time into these rules, and then, these towns don't necessarily get educated on them, or they don't necessarily vote them in for a while, or their rules are just completely off balance from what the state has done. And for us, the people that are permitting or planning a project with folks, there can be a lot of kind of gray area back and forth as to like, well, yeah, you can do this at the state, but the town doesn't really have language on like this specific thing like the state does. So we spend a lot of time working with towns actually to talk over what those rules are, what their ordinances say, and everything like that. And it's fine if they want to have stricter ordinances, but it does certainly make it tough if they don't have all the language and all the rules that the state does, because they just it makes for a sort of a tricky process. So sending a letter to your town rep, talking to them to see if they are adopting the new state rules. This will definitely give a more clear path for people to plan a project and execute it. It would be really nice if the state rules were the state rules for this stuff. They put a lot of time into it. Now we know this is the ruling here. This is what we can do. It can sort of be a black and white situation, but that can't always be the case. Also, you can suggest local training on the new rules. I know, again, the state can be understaffed and it's tough to get out and do things. This is awesome to have New Hampshire Lakes do these educational pieces here. This is exactly what we need to continue promoting and teaching and sharing this information with one another. Do your research. With that, hire a professional. Do your research. Make sure you understand what you're getting into for a project, what you can and can't do with your property, what steps you can take to make sure that the outcome is what it needs to be and that it will actually function. So that's important. Allow for plenty of time for properly planning a project and permitting a project. COVID aside and how busy New Hampshire has gotten, putting that aside, in a regular circumstance, it still takes several months to properly plan and permit a project. In this day and age, it can take upwards of a year. So just have the patience for that. Take the time on the front end to do your planning, and that will definitely make for a swift and professional installation on the back end. Plant natives. Natives can be a lot of fun, and I'll show you that in the next couple slides here. We did a pretty significant renovation at a kids camp in Sandwich on Swam Lake, and all we planted were natives, and a lot of them, a lot of ground cover, ferns, low bush blueberries, and the effect that they have is just stunning. Not to mention, what they're doing for stormwater management, and just the what they give the space for feeling and comfort, and it's really natives can be really successful. And get a LakeSmart assessment. Since joining the program, the camp project was the first one I was actually involved with going through that process. It was amazing and really rewarding to have them come out, assess the property, give you feedback, and as you saw in the photo before, we collectively got an award there at the kids camp. That was amazing, and I look forward to on my own trying to push basically every one of my finished projects through this process. I really think it's something to say when you go through, our website, that we could kind of token the fact that this was a LakeSmart landscape. And, I think it goes to show that you can still do a lot with your property. You can still create a lot of function out of your property without sacrificing, stormwater runoff and protection of the lakes and all of that. So it's a great program that they're doing. And, it's great to be a part of this educational segment as well. And to come back on the fern sod, blueberry sod, this would be my LakeSmart pro tip. Use native sods to provide an instant, effective, and beautiful vegetative buffer to help control erosion, slow stormwater runoff, and protect our precious lakes. The photo on the right behind the chairs, that is low bush blueberries. It's attractive. It produces wild blueberries that are great for cooking pancakes if the animals don't get to them first. And then on the left there, you can see fern sod massings. And I think the key to native sods is that you are planting more of a massing. You're creating more of a mature ground cover that is going to actually be more effective than a single planted potted fern or low bush blueberry. You'd have to plant several of those and wait several years to get this matured effect. So it's not an inexpensive product. I will forewarn people of that, but the effects are instant, and they are super effective at controlling erosion. So if you have those spots on your property, especially low light conditions, the fern sod's great. And the blueberries as well. So we've been using a lot of those and design a lot of those into almost every project that we do. And then I will say a lot of information provided tonight, and there's a lot more information, endless information at the des.nh.gov site. So please check that out as well. Of course, NewHampshireLakes.org has a lot for you guys to check out as well. And StevensLandscaping.com, our website, has more about our process. It has a lot of finished projects. And soon we hope to have some LakeSmart landscape projects, LakeSmart properties posted up there over the next year or two. And you can always reach out to our office at the number there. Also info@stevenslandscaping.com. But if you get on the website, there's also a chance for you to submit a request through the website as well. And please bear with us. We are very busy this year, as we've kind of alluded to earlier. Everyone's sort of in that same boat. But we would love to help as many people as possible, even if it's just to help suggest some things or point people in the right direction. We also have a garden center here in Molten Borough that hopefully we do carry natives, but next year we might put a little bit more emphasis on LakeSmart plants that we can have like at a minimum a list for you while you're there to go through. But if not, we even might do like a table setup with specific plants that you can go get, that you're in the clear to get those planted and feel good about it. So thank you very much. I hope that was did all right on time. Thank you very much. And I guess, Aaron, if I didn't really look at the chat box, so I'm sure there's a couple questions here.
Yeah. That was awesome. Thank you so much. So much information. You did a great job. We do have some questions. We had one that was direct messaged, I think, on accident. So I'm going to start with that one. It was back at the beginning. Lisa is wondering what determines a hazardous tree? Can a homeowner just say that they think it's going to fall on their house, or what qualifies that?
Yeah, so I've seen, it's a good question. I've seen a couple different situations. I guess you know, one of the key things to look at for a hazardous tree is more than like 3/4 of that canopy leaning over the center of the tree. Can you actually see me on video? Because I'm using my hands here talking, but I don't know if
Yes.
you okay. So if more than like three quarters of that canopy is over the center of where that tree is, that can be considered hazardous, especially if it's headed towards a house or a dock, a boat. And so that's one thing. I know insurance companies can give assessments as well. Certain trees that are leaning like that, branches are up on the house. If you can't prune them all off, because it would just kill the tree anyway. There's classifications there. The best thing to do generally is to talk to an arborist. They're going to have a pretty good assessment of, is this tree a threat of falling onto our house or uprooting. So that's a good question.
Great.
Yeah, so Crystal's done a great job, our conservation program manager, of answering some of these questions. Andrea, do
Awesome.
you have the next one
Yeah.
in line?
Yeah, just a couple of sort of nitty-gritty questions about permits. So, if you were to get a permit, shoreland permit, how long are they typically valid for?
Shoreland permits are good for 5 years once they're approved, which is awesome. We go through the process of trying to only go to the permitting table once, and so we do a schematic design master plan for a property and try to include everything that you think you would do kind of in the next 5 years and submit a permit once for all of that. And if you phase that in, great.
Mhm.
If you happen to get started late in that 5-year time frame and the permit is going to lapse, you can request an extension for another 5 years. So effectively, you could potentially have a permit that could be good for 10 years.
Mhm.
And to that effect as well, I will say, if things change on the project, which is very common that things will change,
Mhm.
reduction, addition, you can submit an amendment to those permits as well. So I guess lastly too, anyone that is changing properties, selling their house, buying a house, request what permits they have available at the time, because those permits can be transferred over to the new owner. So there is value in that as well. So just pay attention to that.
Oh, that was excellent. Thank you for mentioning that. That was going to be my next question. That's good to know that in most cases they can be transferable.
Yep.
Awesome. We had a question. So say kind of along those lines, say that you move into a property and, there's an existing shoreline, accessory structure or whatnot, and maybe it's not permitted, what happens then? What should you do or not do? Or, how, can you maintain it? And what are your thoughts on that, John?
Yeah, I've never come across those before, Oh man. It's tough. It's
Yeah.
hard to prove that certain things have been grandfathered, but there is that whole case. You have grandfathered things that before
Mhm.
the rules were even a thing were in
Right.
place. Some are
Right.
very obvious that they've been grandfathered, and then there's other ones that are not so obvious. And you can't find a permit for what was done. That would be one of the first things. If you're moving on to a new property, again, request, you can go to the state and request the permits that are there.
Right.
Most towns also carry any state permits that have been submitted. Review not only the permit language on the approved permit, but review the plan. There's a ton that the permit plan will show you for square footages, locations. It's not uncommon for things to be tweaked just a little bit, but if there's a blatant patio in an area that doesn't show one, okay, that should throw a red flag.
Mhm.
I wouldn't say immediately rip it out, because you're just going to cause disruption. You kind of need a permit to rip it out. But we often work with folks to make things more conforming from that situation.
Mhm.
And so when we kind of pitch these projects to the state, whether we know if it was what year it was done in,
Mhm.
whether it's grandfather or not, we try to make it a better situation. So maybe we, in the new project, we actually bring it back to a conforming location. We reduce the size. We convert it from just a regular patio to a permeable patio. We get people to move sheds and structures to better
Mhm.
locations, and we do a ton of revegetation.
Mhm.
And try to get people to plant new trees if we can.
Great.
It can be a challenge, but
Mhm.
we have a lot of folks that are actually come around to the changes and the ideas, and the finished products still look beautiful and still very functional. So I guess
Great.
yeah, that's my answer for that.
Yeah, no, thank you. So if you move into somewhere new and you find out that maybe there are some unpermitted things in the property, don't freak out, but get in touch with a
Yeah.
professional and see what your
Yeah.
options are.
And you can always bring this down to the state as well.
Mhm.
You bring it to a professional, bring it down to
Mhm.
someone at the state and say, look, this is here. I can't find a permit on this. What are my options?
Mhm.
In some instances, they might just say, leave it alone. We don't want you to disrupt more things right now. Other situations, they might have different answers for. So
Great. Great. Another question, do the regulations take into account anything for making or keeping the shoreline handicap accessible? Any thoughts on that?
that is a great question. I don't think on private residents they have requirements for that. I don't hold me to that answer, but
Mhm. Mhm.
I do know probably for commercial and municipal applications there are.
Sure.
But for private residents, I don't believe they have any specific language that revolves around that I know of.
Okay.
We have incorporated some ADA pathways and things like that for
Mhm.
for that kind of stuff. So it's certainly possible to do that, and I think they do give some consideration to that. I can
Yeah.
recall one specific project where, in order to get down to the dock, we had to have this cut back ramp that was, not the path of least resistance, but it needed to be so because they needed the handicap access.
Mhm.
And we work with the state to get that approved. So
Yeah.
they'll work with you on that. Yeah.
Yeah, I would agree with you. I have a good friend whose mother, needed, handicap accessibility for their dock. And I know that the DES was really helpful in helping them get something that was wide enough and helping them put stairs into the water for her. So
Yep.
I do think they take that into consideration. So that's
Yeah.
awesome. Let's see, the questions are piling up here. Oh my goodness. Razel asked, and I'm just going to sort of read this. It seems in the example of the home that you showed, there is a deck within 50 feet of the accessory line. If you wanted to create stairs down to the ground level, would that count as an accessory structure or part of the home?
Anything attached directly to a house, a deck attached to a house, the stairs off the deck, anything that is physically connected to the house is considered part of the house and part of the primary structure.
Okay.
So again, that house, not sure when that was built. By the remembering back, I think it was pre shoreland permit rules. So it was inside that 50-foot setback. But yeah, you wouldn't be able to get, you know, deck steps off of that inside that 50-foot area. So you'd have to come up with a different alternative. Sometimes you might be able to get a permit to keep them within the same footprint of the deck, or something like that, but you couldn't expand, further beyond that. So.
Okay, this is sort of a more specific question, but I bet there are other people that are wondering this. Anne says she has narrow paths, but the wood on the stairs railing going down a path to access the lake needs to be replaced. If I replace them with wood in the same footprint, or maybe a granite stair with metal railings, should she be seeking to get a permit? So it sounds like she's not changing the footprint, maybe using different material.
So if it's an existing set of like wooden steps, if I'm thinking about this correctly,
Mhm.
down into the lake or to a dock or something like
Mhm.
that, and you're not changing the footprint of that, and let's just say that you have old pressure treated wood that's starting to get slippery or rotting away, you want to go to composite,
Mhm.
you can do that without a permit. That's
Mhm.
not going to be any issue. If you're changing the location or the footprint of those, yes,
Right.
that will be requiring a permit. If you're
Mhm.
switching from that to granite, most definitely that's going to require excavation.
Right.
So yeah, unless you're just kind of replacing the facade of it and not changing the size, you can do that without a permit. But otherwise, you would need a permit.
Right. So if you're starting to relocate or you're starting to disturb the soil, that's when you start to think about the need for a permit.
Yep.
That
Yep.
makes sense. All right. As I'm scrolling down here, I think I know the answer to this. There are large rocks along our shoreline. This is from Lisa. That were being used essentially as a retaining wall to keep the land from sliding into the lake. We see this a lot. This structure is old and starting to cave in. Is this type of structure considered an accessory structure? So,
So accessory structures are only behind the 20-foot setback line.
Right.
If it's right along the shoreline, and is this like I'm hard to tell if it would be like a jetty, maybe a stone jetty. There's a lot of old stone jetties that like
Sure.
supported a dock or something like that. In those cases, those would be considered water access structures and docking structures. And I'm not gonna educate on docking rules. There's a whole
Totally different
that's a whole nother can of
presentation.
worms. Yeah, definitely. So again, best thing to do is you can grab photos. You can email them to us. You can email them to the state. You can email them to other professionals and ask their opinions before you get too far along.
Mhm.
But it sounds like that might be like a jetty that they're talking about.
Yeah.
So if it is a grandfathered jetty, then and it's kind of falling apart, there are definitely avenues to replace that.
Great. Great. This is a great question from Lori. and this is more of maybe a subjective question. Who is responsible for making sure work on any given shorefront is properly permitted and is following state and town rules and regulations? And then a double whammy. If a property owner is in violation, what are the consequences?
Fines and fines. There's sometimes you have to rip stuff out. Sometimes you have to replant things. Revegetation plans is a common one.
Yeah.
And really, unfortunately, until like 3 or 4 neighbors call on one issue, they won't send the compliance officer out. And unfortunately, the state lost one of their key compliance officers. I think they only have one compliance officer right now, I think.
Yep.
Covering all the 1,000 lakes.
Exactly.
It's a lot. So short answer is no, they don't really have anyone policing anything along the lines of that. Again, that's where hiring a professional, you don't have to be, looking over your shoulder at the neighbor, wondering if they're thinking you're doing something wrong, or and have open discussions too with neighbors and stuff, and about things. I don't always suggest going right to the state and saying, hey, is this, go check on that, I don't know. And you can always search on the back end too, so I would suggest looking up that stuff as well.
Right. No, I would agree with you, John. I worked for DES for many years, not in the Wetlands or Shorelands Bureau, but I do know that they are very understaffed, and they have to triage what they're going to
Right.
reply to. But at the same
Yeah.
time, this is why we think that lake associations are so critical to just helping,
Mhm.
not to rat people out or turn people in, but more to let them know. I think, in my work and probably in your work too, most people just don't know. They don't know what the rules are, or they don't understand the rules.
Yeah,
Um,
100%. And I think this is where, the state communicating with the towns a bit more and really pushing the education on this, they can delegate some of those responsibilities out to the town.
Yeah.
And I think someone just mentioned conservation commissions. Yes,
Yeah.
but they're volunteer, and not, some towns don't have them. And so there really should be a huge push from the state, and I think from with the help of with us and you guys and everything like that, just continuing to push the education piece and trying to get as much information out there for everyone.
Great. Well, I'm just scrolling through the questions here. Many we've answered. Crystal in the background, Crystal and Aaron, feel free to pipe in if you've seen any questions that we haven't gotten to.
Yeah, I'm having a hard time because Crystal is very quick tonight and getting
I
a lot of
know.
answers. So I'm trying
Our
to keep up on
expert
what's been.
behind the scenes there.
And we do only have a couple minutes left here. So I do want to just remind everyone that if we don't get to your question tonight, please reach out to us. You can email me. My email address will be in the follow-up you get tomorrow. I can direct you to the right person to answer your question. But we will try to get a couple more in here quickly, maybe if we can. I think one that has not been answered yet, that probably a lot of people are wondering about, is simple do-it-yourself repairs. Donna is asking if she has a crack in a wall at the shoreline, can she repair it herself without a permit?
Yeah, so the good rule of thumb is if you can do this repair work by hand without the use of machinery, which a lot of DIYers aren't going to have that, equipment available or anything like that. If you need to, cement a rock back in place or something like that, or stack a rock back up that fell over, any of that sort of by hand work, even using a shovel, they're not going to require you. It's when mechanized equipment starts to come in that triggers the permit. So if it's the right thing to get it repaired to keep that wall in place, that's certainly okay to do by hand without a permit. And also, I think if I look back at Lisa mentioning that it was about just kind of boulders along a shoreline, what can you do about those? There are avenues for shoreline protection as it relates to the immediate wave action. I know has been a big discussion. There's a lot more wave action. There are avenues, but basically there's seven layers of what you have to try first before you can get down to say putting a shoreline wall in place. And a lot of that is vegetation, and then biotube plantings, and then everything down to hardening the shoreline with more rocks and stuff like that. But they're going to want to see that all the other items have been tried first before you can go for a permit on something that involves adding stone or shoreline wall, are almost impossible to get right now. So unless you have an existing one.
Great. Well, we are past 8 o'clock here. We don't want to hold John up. He is a wealth of information. Thank you again so much for joining us. This has been an amazing presentation and will be a great resource for many, many people, I'm sure, to come. This will be posted on our website so people can go back and look through questions. And again, please reach out if you have any questions that weren't answered tonight. John, thank you so much. And thank you everyone for joining us. Have a great night, everyone.
Thank you.